that you can look at the perpetrators of these crimes and you can love them just as much as the victims of these crimes and realise that they're only carrying out these acts because they don't understand what reality is. They have a distorted view of reality, and you can't blame them for it because they are a product of this world that we have collectively created. And that's the way I tend to look at all of this stuff. And also, when you look at stuff on an energetic level, if you realise that everything happens for a reason, all the negative stuff that's going on in the world is what is helping this consciousness become more aware and more active and more positive. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So I might look at a child being blown up in Gaza and think how terrible that is. But if I was to look at it more holistically, I could also imagine that child, the spirit that is that child, possibly came and chose to be blown up right there on television for me to see, to wake me up to the fact that this is going on in the world and give me the opportunity to address these problems. I see all these problems as opportunities. And that's just the way I tend to look at this sort of stuff, and that helps me perceive it from a different light.
Well,
it works anyway.
I've heard of that before. I've heard of that we actually choose our life and we choose the experiences. And some people choose to be mass murderers so they can get that experience and live their whole life in prison. Other people choose to have other experiences before they even come into this plane.
Like you choose who your parents are going to be, and you choose whether you're going to be born in a liberal kind of democratic house where, you know, everybody's not real religious, or you choose to be raised in a fundamentalist Christian Pentecostal household and have to go to private schools, you know.
If you look at it even more holistically, what if you choose to come here to be the unique frequency that you are in this collective reality, and for the effect that you will have on the collective reality as well? See, it's not just a personal thing. I mean, it's not just for you to experience the universe from your unique perspective, although that's a big part of it. But how you interact with the universe also affects other people, how they perceive your interaction with the universe. So it's a very holistic thing.
Very interesting, very interesting.
That is interesting.
My biggest problem is empathy. When I see that kid blown up in Gaza, I feel it. I mean, I really feel it in my heart.
Empathy is the key. Empathy is the key to everything. What I try to explain to people is that the universe, the very fabric, the very energetic stuff itself, the matrix that makes up this universe is compassion, and your interface with that compassion is empathy. But having empathy, it isn't just empathy for the victims, it's empathy for the perpetrator as well. It's empathy for all things. I believe there is only one law, and that is absolute unconditional love and service to the creation.
I completely agree. You can't just be empathetic and compassionate towards the little kid that's being blown up. You have to be empathetic and compassionate to the people that are hurting you, to the people that...
Absolutely. I mean, I feel as much pity for the perpetrator as I do for the victim. They might be what some perceive to be a very evil person, but what would it take to make a human mind do that? How polarized must this particular individual be to carry out that act? That's the part that fascinates me. And it's as Ben so eloquently put it out, Ben Stewart in Kymatica, as he so eloquently pointed out, people will see these crimes. They will see someone committing an act against someone else, and then they take it upon themselves to go and hurt the perpetrator of that crime. So the perpetrator of this crime might be doing what they're doing on an unconscious level. They might just be a naturally cruel person, and what they're doing is unconscious. And yet here we have a person who pertains to care to others, and he is going to do exactly the same thing as this person was doing, only he's going to raise it to a whole new level of conscious cruel behaviour that he is willing to carry out against this person who is committing this crime. So it's exactly the same thing, only it's conscious that he's doing it. So this is a whole new level, and these are the people that are going to have an even harder time of coming to terms with who and what they are and coming to terms with the shadow. I think Freeman wanted to interject with something here.
Yeah. When we look to the script, and that's where a lot of my research comes in very handy, and I see, of course, W, and I predicted that he would be an evil emperor because the letter W was the sign of the fallen angels. And so his whole purpose was to make you angry, and the fact that he was forced into office was supposed to make you angry. And so it's this, when you see the script, the Princess Warrior programming in your Walmart aisles, then you see that this is what they want from you. They want you seeking angry justice, angry vengeance. They want you programmed to this type of, they wanted 9/11 truth. They wanted people up in arms, you know. So when you take that into consideration, when you see that W was a plant there to make you angry, and on one level you can have empathy because here was the poor son of the head of the CIA. You better believe he's never really had a thought of his own except for in rebellion, you know, and all of his partying and cheerleading and such that he did. But at the same time, you can't blame George W. Bush. One, I doubt he even wanted to be president. And two, he had been mind programmed from the CIA from the beginning, you know, before he was even born. So you can't blame him. Same with the pop stars that are putting out all the music that's being written for them. Lady Gaga, Britney. I mean, I hold Lady Gaga a little more responsible for her actions than I do Britney because Britney was kind of just thrown into it. And Lady Gaga seems to be an active participant.
Right.
So this is the programming that they want you angry. So then, you know, you've got to know that your defense is to not be angry.
Absolutely.
I completely agree with that.
Infinite love is the only truth. Everything else is illusion.
Even for your enemies, which is the hardest thing to do, is to love the person.
They're creating your enemies, right?
Right,
you know,
exactly. They're creating the enemies, so you just need to look at them as you do a puppet on someone's hand. You can't get mad at the puppet. You get mad at the person whose hand is controlling the puppet. So.
Well, that brings an interesting question, though. How do we feel about the people who are controlling the puppets?
Good question.
They're just as polarized as everybody else. That's the thing. A lot of these people are so given over to dark energies, they've just become addicted to that way of life. But you can't blame them for it. I mean, a lot of these people are born into these families. They're raised to be this way. And this particular bloodline, the ruling bloodline, these people seem to be very much devoid of empathy. And I don't think that they consciously do evil. I just think it's just the way they are. It's just the way they've been raised. It's just the way they've been bred almost, I guess.
And this goes way back to the Sumerian, to the Egyptian cultures. I mean, these are all bloodlines that trace back there, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they go way, way, way back, and they've never broken the bloodline. It's always remained solid.
So do you think this reptilian, I guess this is where they're operating from the reptilian brain, is that connected to Anunnaki, places like that?
Well, this is a very deep rabbit hole to go down. You're kind of trapping me here. I try to avoid these issues on my show. People tend to ask me questions about alien, and I sort of colourfully sidestep. I try to remain very, very on the fence with all of that stuff. I have my own personal beliefs on what's going on. I might hand this question over to Freeman. He can answer this one.
You know, honestly, I feel like our focus should go beyond that right now. We could get into that, and we have, and there's a lot of research, but, you know, all of the people we have to study are sketchy. We have Sitchin, we have Lawrence Gardner, we've got lists of people that seem to be interlinked with the entire mind control spectrum that we have, so we can't go honestly by any of those details. We can use them because we know they have to present the truth, but yet leave out what they don't want known. And so we can see that there's manipulation in that whole ancient story.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that human beings can do this, though. I mean, what drives human beings to commit these atrocities?
Well, it all depends on what you mean. Because when I look around, I don't see human beings perpetrating the atrocities except for those that have been put through mind control institutions such as the military. And then they're just screwed. When we're looking at a very small fraction of the world when we're seeing the atrocities. It really is very small compared to the rest of humanity. And so that's what makes it difficult because we only publicize the atrocities. And then even in our entertainment, we get nothing but more atrocities. So we're seeing a view of humanity that's completely false. The BP oil spill was meant to demoralize you. These things are meant to demoralize you. Avatar was meant to demoralize the military. And so it's all mind pattern programming. It's all programming and media that has instituted this mindset that humans are these horrible, vicious creatures. Because that's all that they report on, you know?
Right, yeah. Absolutely.
So what I'm seeing now is that humanity's at this point, we're at the end of the world, as it were, and we're wondering what to do. How do we resolve this situation? And what we've really come down to is that it goes just to the basics, the such basics, that humanity really needs to understand that they have been under a form of mind control for millennia, and that we are, this civilization that we exist in is not the product of human endeavor. It is a controlled mechanism that's been crafted by a particular priestcraft throughout time, and we can prove this. So this is why you have pentagrams in the street plans of Washington, D.C. These are the men that had the ability to make their imagination real and therefore cast their spell on all of the world. And so now we live under their aesthetic terrorism, their domination of buildings and architecture that tell us they are real because they have made themselves real. So we now understand this. We've recognized this situation that the zoo we live in was not crafted by our hands. So now we begin to say, okay, what do we want out of this situation? And what we found, because we are in a time of crisis, is that we have to start with the basics. People need to start permaculture gardens. They need to turn their back lawns into gardens. And even if you're an American and therefore transient, because there's not very many people in America that actually own the property that they live on, at least in all the towns I've ever lived in, everyone are renters. And so they don't want to institute any sort of progress on the property. And this is a mindset that we're going to have to set down and forget. And we're going to have to dig into our gardens and start to plant food, because this is the one thing next to friendship, next to community, that's going to help. And we don't need to go and seek the vipers and try to cut the heads of the snakes. What we need to do is build the garden that we desire to live in. So it's not our job to go out and attack them. It's our job to rebuild and to reconstruct reality and make it real.
But every time we build the garden, though, they come by and they cut the garden down.
Well, you've got to keep building them anyway. This is the thing. So we can talk about who's in charge. I mean, I could sit here. I could spend time. I could convince you that it's reptilians. I could convince you that it's the Jesuits, that it's the Jews, that it's the Vatican conspiracy, that it's multi-dimensional aliens, that it's the Illuminati, that it's Club of Rome, that it's anything. We can go down all these rabbit holes, and we can spend weeks and months researching who and what they may be. But at the end of the day, the world is still in the state that it's in, and it's probably worse because we've neglected it while we've been looking into who they may be. What we need to do is focus in the now and start improving our situation. We need to really start concentrating on solutions. I believe that once we implement some of these solutions, who they are will become very apparent. We'll just have to look for those who scream the loudest. But putting in gardens everywhere, I think, is the key. I mean, if everybody did this, even if you're renting a place, put in a garden for the next people. And eventually you'll come around and you'll get to a place and someone has put in a garden for you. I mean, it all comes back in the end, and what goes around comes around. So I think it's one of the best things we can actually absolutely do. Everything that they have done with all the systems that they have in place have been done to divide society. And there's a real clue in that all we have to do is unite, build community, and we can defeat the whole thing. And that's the only way we can do it, is by building community. It's got to be done on a grassroots level. You can't enter into the system and think you can bring the system down from within. You've simply got to build community and step away from the system.
Well, here's a good example of that. The mosque that they just built in New York City, that was one of those things that they put in there to divide, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just the best example I could come up with off